Hi there, Sharon Horne-Ellstrom here. Welcome to day 101 of our Be a Better You annual challenge. We're doing one thing every day this year to be a better person, be a better version of ourselves, not compared to anybody else, just compared to us. We're doing a little thing every day that helps us to be more of who we want to be. And today, just like the rest of this month, we're focusing on and talking about different relationship. Communication was last month, relationship related topics. And today's topic is tied into last month's topic of, we focused on communication all last month, and it's communication in our relationships. I'm going to share 5 best practices across all types of relationships. We'll talk about a couple of different relationships and why communication is so important, which most of us can relate to because depending on how old you are, and if you're listening to me, you've been involved in relationships your entire life, right? We have relationships with our family, relationships with our coworkers, relationships with our community, relationships in our friendship circle. I mean, if you've gone to school, if you've interacted, if you've had a play date, you're 2 or 4 years old, like my granddaughters, you've already been involved in several relationships and you're learning to communicate. Sometimes we have to go back and relearn how to communicate. Depending on our past experiences, we might not be the best communicator in all areas and aspects of our life. And I know that I fall into some of the 5 pitfalls that I'm going to be sharing with you too, to make sure that we're monitoring and paying attention to ourselves and being self-aware in terms of, hey, am I a really bad listener? Maybe I could get better at that a little bit every day this year so that people know that I actually care about what they have to say. I don't just care about what I have to say. So let's talk about communication. And I just challenge you to think about today communication in different types of relationships that you're involved in, and relationships you've been involved in the past versus relationships you're currently involved in. And pay attention to, are there places that I didn't communicate when I knew I should have? Are there boundaries that were pushed and broken for me because they go against my core values that I didn't clearly communicate with the person that I was in the relationship with? I will say I have a lot of experience with that one. And it wasn't that I didn't communicate the boundaries, it's that the person did not care or respect them. And I put up with it way too long, which is lots of lessons learned there for me. And I think the biggest challenge in that is forgiving ourselves for not making different choices and decisions in past relationships. Excuse my throat today. Morning weather in Texas is different than morning weather in Wisconsin. So think of romantic relationships that you've been involved in. You know, we've all dated more than one person for the most part in our life before we settle in with our current partner. And think about how you communicated in the ones that worked out really well and lasted a long time versus the ones that were really short-lived. And you might find, like I found when I go back and do a review like that, that it's because I knew we weren't a match and I didn't actually see a long-term future or care that much about that particular relationship to communicate everything that I would normally. And I think that's how you find the person that's for you, is when you can communicate about anything and everything in a way that makes you both feel okay and that you can grow and have shared values, etc., like we talked about yesterday. Relationships and families tend to be a hotbed of communication or lack of communication. Hey, I had a boy and a girl. I raised 2 kids and I'm proud to say they're awesome human beings. I'm very, very proud of them in so many ways. And we've all gone through the different stages of, before they can even talk, you're trying to figure out what they're trying to communicate. Then they can talk and it's garbly and you can't really understand it, but you're trying to figure out what they're trying to communicate. Then they get bigger and no. Everybody goes through the why and the no stage. And then we get to communicating and understanding based on the relationships in your family. How open or closed are your communications, etc. And often when we hit those teenage years, we want to pull our hair out, but we live through them and we learn from them. And we remember that young adults and people are just trying to be the best version of themselves. So what are some of the 5, I'm going to share 5 best practices in communication, in relationships, or just in communication in general, that will help us to strengthen our relationships. Because this is all about, if we're talking about being a better person, we want to be a better person so we can show up better in our relationships. And communication is a foundational way of doing that. So, of course, first and foremost is active listening. Pay attention and actually really be present and listen to what the other person has to say. Without interrupting, without comment, until there's a pause in the conversation. This is one that I practice every single day. Why? Because I am not an awesome listener. I am a really good listener, but I keep telling myself I'm not, so I should stop that. But listening for all of us is a challenge because we know we can help sometimes, and we want to just jump in and help, especially with our kids or our grandkids. And sometimes all we need to do is just take a deep breath, pause for a second, and let them come to their own conclusions, right? I'm learning that with toddlers and screaming. I forgot how much little girls just scream. Sometimes they scream out of excitement. Sometimes they scream out of frustration. Sometimes they scream out of they want to do something that you don't want them to do. Sometimes so much weight, way more weight than our words do. And we forget pat. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You can say a positive thing to your dog in a negative tone of voice, and they'll react as if you said a negative thing to them. You can say a negative thing to your pet in a positive tone of voice, and they will react as if you said a positive thing. I learned this, I don't remember where, but I learned it several years ago, and I tried it out on my cats and my dogs, and it was amazing. And after doing that little exercise, I realized how powerful tone of voice was, and that I needed to remember when I'm talking to other human beings that I have to keep that in mind as well. Third, empathy. Try to understand how the other person feels and where they're coming from, and really get what they're feeling and trying to convey and what their intent is. Don't just assume. When in doubt, ask. Fourth, clarity and honesty. Be honest and upfront in your communications. I'd say if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. But that's not always true either. Sometimes if you love and care about the person you're communicating with, you need to give them feedback that might be hard, that they might not want to hear. But if they're doing something that's hurting them or you need to let them know. And I just mean, even if it's hurting your feelings. Timing, know when to communicate. It's just as important as communicating. And kind of goes in line with giving feedback. Feedback should always be given to benefit the person, not to get it off your chest. And a lot of people don't like feedback because they've gotten so much feedback that wasn't even about them. It was about what the person giving the feedback was about. If you're in business, you know exactly what I'm talking about. People will criticize and say stuff about you and your business that usually isn't true, but they'll criticize, and they've never even done anything like that. I learned early on in business that it doesn't matter what other people think of my business, because my business is none of their business. What I think about my business and my life is my business. So what are some of the pitfalls of communication? I'm going to share 5 of these. I'll try to be more quick than I have been in the different best practices, because I think we need to focus on the best practices and really master those skills, and then the pitfalls sort of fall away. First one and foremost, which I am definitely guilty of and certainly have been in the past, is interrupting or finishing other people's sentences. Now, if you're in a relationship where finishing other people's sentences is okay, then you're even probably more of an interrupter, right? And depending on your relationship, I grew up in a family of girls, and we all were in sync and would finish each other's sentences. Well, when you go out to your friendship group, sometimes your friends don't want you finishing their sentences because what you're assuming they're going to finish with is totally wrong. And so that's a big one that I had to learn. Stonewalling or withdrawing from a conversation altogether. We see that a lot in politics and in the news, where we'll see stonewalling and people just walk away. I will admit that I have only ever walked away in the middle of a meeting one time. And it was just after my sudden cardiac arrest. And I listened intently, listened for about 10 minutes. And I had just gotten out of the hospital, and I was like, nope, not going to take on any of this negativity. And I apologized to our city council member. I waved at him to let him know that I was bowing out, and I walked out. Criticism, which targets the person instead of the behavior. Boy, do we see a lot of this going on in the world, right? If you are criticizing a person and assuming bad things about them, that's on you. That is totally inappropriate. It is placing your judgment on other people as human beings which we are all awesome. As human beings, we are all perfectly amazing and wonderful, no matter how bad our behavior might be. And not just focusing on the behavior. If you're just regurgitating things that you've heard from someone else or from somewhere else, that is, criticism. And if it's targeting the human being, you're going to have to answer for that someday. That's all I have to say about that. Defensiveness, which shuts down openness. If you are super defensive, if somebody shows you enough love and care and kindness to give you some feedback about something and you get all defensive instead of taking a deep breath and asking yourself, why might they think that? Why might they have observed that or made that assumption or decided that I was doing this, before you start defending why you behaved in a way that wasn't probably appropriate in the first place. Because we all do that sometimes, right? And then finally, number 5 is sarcasm or passive-aggressive comments. And again, they erode trust. We don't want to do them. I find that I will do those on social media, which I'm going to stop doing. I'm just going to stop participating in anything negative social media. I'm committing to that right now because it hurts me more than it hurts anybody else. And so why would I bother doing that? All right, so that's our topic for today. So today our action item is actually just to think about your communication with respect to your relationships. Pick a relationship, any relationship, and do some self-awareness check and just pay attention today to how you communicate in that relationship. How well do you listen? Do you interrupt? I interrupt my granddaughters all the time, usually the screaming. I interrupt the screaming because I don't like it. Well, maybe it's better if I take a pause and I find out why they're screaming before I say anything, right? I think that would be a better way to handle it. So when I get home, I'll try that. All right. So today, pick a relationship. Pay attention to and be aware of your communication and see if you're doing any of the pitfalls, any of the 5 pitfalls. And if you are, think of a strategy to counteract that and practice it. And if you aren't, just pick one of the areas of good communication and just practice that today. Any questions? Hit me up and ask. Otherwise, have an awesome day, and I'll, of course, be with you tomorrow.